Are we recording this?
Yes.
Yes.
And it's
Somebody-
live.
Yeah, I know, but
I mean, it's live on YouTube.
that makes me even more nervous.
Okay. Should I start?
Yep, go
Sarah,
ahead.
or should I wait? 2 minutes, two
You
more
can
minutes.
start. No, you can start, I think. People will trickle in.
How many do we have now? I can't see.
11,
Okay.
we'll get more.
Yeah, I'll wait another minute, 4:05.
I just sent out another email with a live link on it, so.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Okay, I think we will start. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the SAP Fall Lecture Series. For today, we have a very, very special presenter, lecturer, friend of SAP. But I want to start my introduction with a quote. The greatest legacy one can pass on is not money, but rather a legacy of character and faith. So I would like to introduce a friend of SAP, IAP. It was then IAP when Mahendra was with us. He is a legacy for the School of Architecture and Planning. He has taught for the Institute. Before it became a school, he has taught for more than 25 years on and off. He was a busy architect. So we were only able to hire him when he had the time. So when I came in 2008 as the founding dean for the school, Mahendra was there to prepare me well. He shared what Morgan's culture is and what to expect as I built the school. So I truly thank him for this. Mahendra Parekh is a seasoned and well-known architect, not only in Baltimore, in Maryland, in India, all over the place. He was at one time president of AIA Baltimore. He was also a commissioner for the Civic Design Commission. It was then called Civic Design Commission. He was also on the board for the Neighborhood Design Center. His design work has also received numerous awards. So that's why I call him a seasoned architect. I'd like to end the introduction with another quote. Consider meekness as a character trait to develop. Only then will you leave a legacy as a leader who influence and touch lives. And I'll tell you this, Mahendra Parekh has touched generations of students at Morgan. Many of these students have already formed, or in the past have formed their own architecture firms, have formed their own businesses, and they are hiring our students, our alumni. So his legacy has gone beyond just the time that he was at Morgan. So we are very honored to have him here to talk to us about what he's been doing lately and all his words of wisdom that he can impart to us. So Mahendra?
thank you, Marianne. Boy, how am I going to start with that wonderful introduction? I'm so glad that I got this opportunity. I wish it would have been more personal, but so be it. This is my first Zoom lecture ever, so bear with me, and anything that doesn't come through, it's all my doing, not the support of people who have helped me put this presentation together. Having said that, you know the sort of brief history. I was just asking someone how many students we have now. And 40, 50, 60, 70 sounds like a low number today. In 1980, when I walked in, we had only 10 students in architecture. And for years and years, we struggled with 3 and 5 and 10. So today, my goodness, what you guys have achieved is way beyond anybody's dream or imagination. Anyway, now my presentation today is mostly, I say this about sustainability. Think globally, act locally. This is all about acting locally in what I do in India today. So on this poster, you see, I'm going to, since I practiced in US for almost 40 plus years, I'm enormously influenced by, my practice in US. Sustainability. Last 8 or 10 years of being in India, it has changed somewhat in the way I perceive sustainability. So on the poster, you'll see on the left, 2 projects are in the US. On the right, 2 projects are in India. And at the bottom, I taught graphics. I taught presentation. So I'm still very deep into that. And I will show you what is my latest and greatest graphic methodologies, if that's the right word. So anyway, I always have this quote from Gandhi: "Earth provides enough to satisfy everyone's needs, but not everyone's greed." Now the question is the need and wants and greed. Unfortunately, what were the wants have become needs, and unfortunately, what have wants become greed have become wants. So I think I don't know how to draw the line here, but Mahatma Gandhi said these words. He lived a most sustainable life in every which way, even during the time of the Industrial Revolution of the world. But he taught us a very simple way of life, by having this quote as his alma mater. He lived by this mantra. Next. Now, I just want to touch base with a word scene about, I don't dwell too much on the word politics of sustainability, but today, total population of the world is 7.6 billion people. China, 1.4 billion, India, 1.3 billion. I want to emphasize that. India, 1.3 billion people, USA, 0.3 billion people, and Sudan, 0.042 billion people. And the next right column, it tells you how much kilowatt energy, meaning electricity, we use per year per person. And you can see the difference. You can see where US is. China is catching up, unfortunately. So we have enormous consumption at the world level, especially in the Western world. The lower part of the table shows you the population, rural population versus urban population, which is very important. USA is 70% urban. However, 50% of that is suburban. India is 35% urban, 65% rural. It's catching up slowly but surely. In China, 45% urban, 55% rural. So India still has a huge rural population, and I think the sustainability at that level is more important than anything else. The next. This is a very quick little sketch of what sustainability in India, how sustainability in India is perceived. India is a very religious, Hinduism is very strong. And India believes in the old scriptures, Vedanta, which talks about creation, sustainer, and destroyer. There are three super gods, we believe, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwar. And I don't want to get too much into the religion practices, because religion practices are bound to cultural practices, and consequence of culture's practices what needs to be responded in architecture. But sustainer, the Vishnu, the sustaining God, basically has 5 sustaining elements. That is sun, wind, earth, water, and fire. And these are all treated as gods in India. And we worship sun, we worship wind, earth in a manifestation of God. And each one, then it manifests into the planning architectural strategies of what we do. For example, sun, prayer, orientation, health, very important, wind, movement of air, comfort, earth, nourishment, water, purification, and fire, basically sort of a cooking rituals. And all of this actually, if you bring it all the way down to the architecture or practices of planning, it has a lot of meaning to it. So the reason I've shown this diagram while I'm practicing in India, I realized that if I use these metaphors, if that's the right way to put it, it becomes much more easier to work with the clients. Every culture, every nation, every region has its sort of inbuilt beliefs and practices, but they are sort of descendant from the past. And if you understand them better, I think it makes it easier to practice. Next. Now, I'm going to concentrate on India largely, even though I'm going to speak a little bit about architecture in my architecture in the United States. And India really worships its region and climate and plans accordingly, historically anyway. I think we lost our way, a little bit our way during the Britishers' time. So India is divided into basically 3 regions. I'm sorry, we have dogs here, so unfortunately. So anyway, this diagram actually shows how India responds to climate, including planning of the temples, including planning of the planning of the houses. Next. Now let me focus into where I am today. I live on a ashram, a 24-acre piece of property. I call it a microcosm of the world. We are sustained by this piece of property. We eat what we grow. We try to create our own energy sources as much as we can through solar, biogas, and plan comfortable life with the nature. Everything what we do is with the nature, and this is where I live. This is where I practice. And about a year ago, I started an environment center to promote the local art, craft, and design on this campus. And I'm going to show you next. I'm going to show you a video. Well, before I do that, let me just say that this ashram was founded by 2 known literary giants in our language. The people you see are the people who live on ashram. And the reason I'm showing this slide is I just recently helped design a memorial for the lady founder who passed away about a year ago at the age of 93. The man founder has a monument on the right on the top. And I wanted to make the connection between 2. And as simple as you see, that was her desire, to be as simple, almost no statement, memorial. And we responded to her desires with a single tree in the center and a prayer space around. So this is where I live. These are the people who are with me, who work with me, and these are the people who founded this ashram 30 years ago, 35 years ago almost. When they started this ashram, there was not a single tree on the ashram. Nothing ever grew. There was no water. So what you can see what has been achieved in 30 years to have this kind of legacy left to us to continue with. Next. Now I'm going to show you a video which shows Ecad Center, the center I helped founded to promote art, craft, and architecture. Let's watch. Sound. I don't see the sound.
1 second, let me try and see this.
Can you hear it?
No.
Something is wrong. We need to start from scratch.
Kyle, do you think it's because you're muted?
Sound is missing.
That would probably be it.
I unmuted it, and did it help?
No.
Can you try restarting the share? And make sure when you do it, share it as a video.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
ECAD, Environment Center for Arts and Design, known as ECAD, has been born out of one of Nandigram's aspirations to promote sustainable way of life. Considering the fascination with the technology, new building materials and construction methodologies, the traditional regional art and craft, historically a usable skill, for too long in recent past, has been put on a back burner or is available to privileged few. It needs to be brought back into the mainstream of livelihood. ECAD Center will strive to combine new technology with art and craft to bring about a new way to look at what is most expedient for sustainable practices. Gandhiji said, "India lives in its villages." It was true then and it is true now, though in a different spirit.
One student or a human should be equally loaded with the bookish knowledge as well as the technical knowledge, where he or she should not be dependent on anybody.
Main purpose is to connect artists, architects, common people, especially that આજે નંદીગ્રામની આજુબાજુના ગામડાના જે લોકો છે, સો હવે કઈ જગ્યાએ શીખવા, પણ અમે જ્યારે એમની સાથે અહીંયા કામ કરીશું, એ નવું શીખ્યા છે અને અમે પણ નવું શીખ્યા છે.
બધા માટે ઓપન છે, કોઈ પણ આવી શકે, અને જે કેપેબલ નથી એને જેની પાસે નોલેજ છે એ પણ અહીંયા આવીને કામ કરી શકે અને ઘણું બધું શીખી શકે અને આપણને શીખવી પણ શકે. તો એ એક પર્પસ છે.
Idea is to allow anybody who is interested in art and craft, who has some knowledge also of art and craft, and let them experiment with things that they would otherwise not, and give them some base, including financial base, so that they are not struggling to make a living.
There are around 700,000 villages in India. While present economy is thriving in urban areas, which consists almost of 35% of India's population, without the robust support from villages, India cannot sustain on its own uncontrolled urban growth.
We can train them for the modern world. So we give them drawings and design. Now they can understand and doing everything, and so that is the best part of working here.
એ લોકો ડિઝાઇન બતાવે છે એ હું ધ્યાનમાં લઈને એને વ્યવસ્થિત કરીને આપું છું એમ.
સાથે સાથે ડિઝાઇન પણ કેવી રીતે કરવું, અમારા વગર પણ એ લોકોના પણ ડિઝાઇન કંઈક થોટ્સ હોવા જોઈએ કે આજે ડિઝાઇન તો છે જ, પણ પર્સનલ નીડ્સને કેવી રીતે એમાં ઇમ્પ્લિમેન્ટ કરવું, દેટ ઇઝ ધ મેઇન ગોલ.
કોઈ ડિઝાઇન ત્યારે જ ખબર પડે, તો આમ ખબર નથી પડતી. એમ કામ કરવા લાગે ને પછી ખબર પડી જાય એમ આ રીતે કરવાથી એ થાય છે.
How you can use, how you can create your team, that in future they can do work everywhere in the urban place.
The center is situated at Nandigram Trust campus in Valsad, where existing 2,000 square feet warehouse is renovated to accommodate and organize large conferences, small group meetings, studio workshops, and more. Surrounding covered and open outdoor spaces would serve as a sculpture court. Mahendra Parekh, architect, a resident of Nandigram, and his design team, with the help of local craftsmen and skilled workers, were able to accomplish the transformation in a short time of 4 months. Up until the inaugural ceremony, they worked continuously and created beauty from a marginally attended land around the warehouse.
When I came back from United States last year, it was a COVID time. It was very quiet. It was very nothing was happening in Nandigram much, and so I decided to take the chance and take the advantage of this time or opportunity to do something that can be a part of the future of Nandigram. And that's why Environment Center for Art and Design came about.
COVID time was really difficult for us, in terms of work, in terms of, mental health. And at that time, Mahendra sir, called us and we got involved in this process. And, by coming here so regularly, interacting with these people, doing work, executing things, એનાથી એટલી બધી એનર્જી મળી છે અને તે પણ પોઝિટિવ એનર્જી
કે ના કંઈક નવું થાય છે, કોઈકના ફાયદા માટે થાય છે, તો એમ કામ કરવાનો ઉત્સાહ કંઈક અલગ જ હોય એમ.
I think Ecad is a very free space for all the students coming here, and there's no restriction here that you should be working in a very particular way. So I think very free environment in which all the students will be working. So it will lead to basically more exploration and more creativity.
A sustainable practice at Nandigram includes holistic approach to every aspect of activities, from organically nurtured and grown vegetation and agricultural crops to experiments in biogas production and to solar generated energy, new technology to support very basics of living. In a similar vein, regional art and design will seamlessly be infused with deep landscape in nature and move along in tandem.
નંદીગ્રામમાં એટલે વિક્રમશિલા કરીને જે કેમ્પસ છે એમાં એક સ્ટોરેજ ખાલી હતો. સો અમે લોકોએ ડિસાઇડ કર્યું કે એ સ્ટોરેજને જ કંઈક આપણે એઝ અ વર્કશોપમાં કન્વર્ટ કરીએ અને થોડું એ સ્ટોરેજને જ એવી રીતે અમે ડિઝાઇન કર્યો કે થોડું ઇકો ફ્રેન્ડલી હોય અને સસ્ટેનેબિલિટીના આસ્પેક્ટ્સથી કેવી રીતે આપણે બજેટને લો કરી શકીએ, કેવી રીતે મટીરિયલ સિલેક્શન કેવા હોય કે જેમાં આપણે બજેટ્સને ધ્યાનમાં રાખીને અમે એને પછી રિનોવેશન કર્યું.
ટ્રાઇબલ્સ પાસે અને જે લોકલ વિલેજર્સ છે એ લોકો પાસે એક સ્કિલ્સ છે, પ્રેક્ટિસીસ છે જે એ લોકો ડે ટુ ડે પ્રેક્ટિસ કરી રહ્યા છે. એમાંથી જ આપણે સાથે એક્સપેરિમેન્ટ કરીને કે આપણે કરંટ અર્બન લાઈફને પણ શું આપી શકીએ છીએ બાય પ્રમોટિંગ લોકલ પ્રેક્ટિસીસ એક પ્રયાસ રહેશે.
The youngest person in the village does this creative work, but the dream here is to spark more interest to build his or her own bright future. The idea is to turn this dream into a reality and be put on the right path. The implementation of these ideas may require a lot of resources and assistance. However, it will change many lives for a better future. At the same time, the attitude of the villagers will also change, which is necessary and important for the generation to come.
They can touch more unknown facets of the subject itself, where a workshop like metal, wood, pottery, all those might get emerged.
Promotion of local art and craft in a very meaningful way. So the hope is that we can capture that craft and sort of channelize them in certain ways so that they can flourish with the kind of clientele base that they need. For example, we had a Mangela family to do a lot of bamboo work, vase work, but their limits are very. They make very small craft things. They are not able to grow larger and bigger in terms of building things, which is furniture, window screens. Just get them to the next level of what they are capable of. Otherwise, they are mired into doing same thing over and over again.
Look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better. Expanding this idea, a special biophilic agroforest plot, a parcel of land is assigned for such experiment, in which one gets the necessary education from nature and uses it in daily life and tries to make life easier.
I think एक live demonstration ground हसे which will have wide spectrum of learning. It would be hands-on. It would be survival skills. It would be seeing a lot of animals flourishing, a lot of habitat flourishing. So I think it's a mixed system which will offer a diverse learning opportunity.
Forest is a large habitat for many things, while agriculture is concentrated on a food produce and profit. So we are trying to kind of finding balance between it.
This whole system has the backing of a trustworthy organization like Nandigram, but we also need your participation and help. So we are appealing to all of you to understand the purpose of community upliftment in this one sincere effort and give the right support.
As much as possible આપણે નેચર સાથે રહીએ, નેચરને પ્રમોટ કરીએ, ટ્રાઇબલ આર્ટ, આર્કિટેક્ચર એન્ડ કલ્ચરને પ્રમોટ કરીએ.
આ સેન્ટર બન્યા પછી આજુબાજુની જે આર્ટને લગતી કોલેજીસ, સ્કૂલ્સ અને જે મેઇન આ રિજનના જે ક્રાફ્ટમેન, લોકલ ક્રાફ્ટમેન હશે એ લોકોને ઘણું શીખવા મળશે.
કે લાઈક મને પેઇન્ટિંગ શીખવી છે તો હું જે બીજા મેમ્બર્સ છે એના પરથી શીખી શકું, ઓર કોઈ લોકલ પબ્લિક છે લાઈક વારલી આર્ટ ને હું શીખી શકું.
I will always come here and learn from people, students, karigars and everything. Especially we learn lots of things from sir.
My hope is that ECAD in a small way will begin an exploration or a research in the areas that we are interested most in, which is art, craft and architecture, and allow a dialogue to happen here without any major restrictions. Allow it to flourish, allow it to air out all the opinions and have a freedom to do what they would like to do within certain, of course, within certain limits.
I think I'll learn a lot more from them as well, and having my painting skills, I can help other local people too.
Let's make this idea a banyan tree together.
Best of luck.
Best of luck.
Best of luck.
Come here, enjoy here, because Nandigram is our family.
Contribute your part. Visit us on nandigram.org or come to the Nandigram to serve, to share, and to spread happiness. Environment Center for Arts and Design, art of building a future.
Okay, you can go back to slides. So I couldn't resist but to put this quote from M.K. Gandhi again: "Be the change we wish to see in the world." We talk a lot about it, but we need to make sure that the change starts with us. I always say that discomfort is the beginning of a creative process. Next. First, I'm going to very quickly run through some of my work in US. Most of my practice in US was residential. I'm going to just share with you only 2 projects and make some comparison with what I do in India and what has changed in what I do. Next. How do you get in practice when you are so young, when you are an immigrant, when you want to make some impact in what you do and how you basically market yourself? So I decided to do my own house first in 1984 in Mount Washington, Baltimore. And it was enormously influenced by the 1973 and 1979 oil embargo by the Middle Eastern countries. And I remember so well that I had to stand in the line to get 5 gallons of gas for hours. And that had an enormous impact of how I would want to really design my work, and how I would consider energy efficiency as the primary mode of concern. Next. So this was a house in Mount Washington, and it's a very, without going through all the details about what the plan is and but the idea was to always be mindful of the orientation. See, in a colder climate, you invite the sun in. In a warmer climate, you keep the sun out. These are 2 fundamental, concepts by which you design the house. Next. So all of the designs ever I have done in my life, you can see very clearly: sections, spaces, the light, the winter sun, the summer sun. The aesthetic evolves. Functionality and orientation were the primary concern. This house is a very passive solar design, and it's been almost 35 years since I built the house, and present occupiers will testify to the fact that it is working beautifully as a passive solar home. Next. Some images. The left image is that's me when I was very young and designed this house and lived in this house. The one on the right is when I was called in 2007 or 2008, I believe, to redesign some of the parts of the houses. And, it was almost 30 years later. Just want to show you, it's wonderful to be called back to do the house or to any project you have done, to look into it again. Next. And the house is still there. If you ever want to drive by, it's a 1620 The Terraces. Of course, it's much more richer and better, and better looking than I had, because the present occupiers are very sustainable in every which way they live the life, including arboretum on the grounds. Next. The present occupier is a Korean American family, very Zen-like aesthetics. Next. Minimalism. Sustainability is best described by minimalism, minimum efforts in every which way. Next. Next is the basement. This is another house I did in Chicago in a cold climate. And you will see how sustainable the house is when the house has a volume and glass exposure that nobody would believe that one could even dare to design something like this in that climate. And I'll tell you how we did it. Next. So these are some of my sketches. Those who have been with me in the past, they know that I used to teach graphics and design, hand drawings. Of course, the medium has changed greatly now. And so these are early examples of, again, you can see the lower right corner sectional diagram, the study of the sun. Next. Next. So this is the house sitting in a cold winter snow. So when I got the commission, I realized that, my goodness, how am I going to heat this house? I mean, I'm so stuck with this orientation, sun orientation, the height, the volume, the space, the light. But how do I, because I did some very traditional quick analysis of the energy required to heat this house, was way out of whack. So we decided to go with a geothermal. We dug 11 250 feet deep wells, and heat is extracted from these wells and it heats the house at a very minimum cost of about no more than $500 a month. Next. Anyway, this one shows how I blend with the rest of the environment. Next. You can see the volumes. You can see the glass. It would scare daylight out of it, literally daylight out of anybody. But the house is still there. It was designed in 2007, so it's almost 14 years, and I have so far had no complaints for heating of the house. Next. The next. Now you will see now the work in India, a bit of the work in India. Everything I have done in India is non-air conditioned, not heated, because you don't need the heat anyway. You may need air conditioning if you are comfort oriented, but we have even figured out how to deal with that. And also you have to bring yourself to begin to accept some discomfort, and once you get used to it, it's not such a bad thing. So this is our house in Nandigram. Next. Again, learn a lot from moving the air. The hot air rises, and this one has a full basement, which is a scary thing for anybody in this part of India, because it rains almost 110 inches in 2 months, monsoon, and try to make sure that water doesn't get in the basement. We did a lot of technology. Now you can see this, that you have a massive overhangs to keep the sun out. And only during the east and west in the morning and in the evening, you get the sun in. The next. This is the environment of Nandigram. Anyway, this is the interior shot of the house. Total local materials. Bricks are molded right around, there are many such brick molding places. The brick costs only, I'm even embarrassed to say that it costs only 5 cents a piece. I used 21,000 bricks in this house. An interesting thing is that clear story light brings wonderful lights. Of course, those who do not like the daylights, it's not the best house in the world. But you can see, I mean, the walls are double, the roof is triple actually. There are 3 roofs, and there is a space on the top of the roof to move the air. Next. Some more images. Next. The next. So high volumes, daylights, ambient light. This house has even light in the entire house. There are no dark shadows anywhere. Next. Even in the night, the roof almost looks like it's floating in the air. Next. This is probably one of the best shots. It describes the whole attitude towards the lighting, the fenestration in the space. The next. And this is another quick, I've done a lot of small projects in India, 2 rooms, 3 rooms. Whether you do 2-room project, whether you do 10-room house, whether you will see one of the projects, whether you do a hostel for 600 students, the basic concepts don't change. Response to the climate don't change. Next. This is only 2 rooms, 2-room little complex, very local materials, local craft, local technologies. Next. 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 And this, for example, my own house cost me about $50,000. This one cost me about $7,000. Of course, I don't want to compare dollars and rupees because that's not a fair comparison. But when you do it, with a local labor, local materials, it's quite inexpensive or reasonable. We still use some modern materials, of course, the metal roof, and you have to. Next. Next. This is a small building, small little box, 4,000 square feet, office building surrounded by industrial structures. So India is beginning to understand this sort of envelope of the building in double layer. Next. So it's just a small office box. We basically covered the second layer by louvers, and they are movable by hands only. It's amazing how, because this office building had to be mostly internal. The surrounding is not the best to look out. Next. And the spaces it creates, the environment it creates, is quite marvelous actually. Feels very good. Next. And I'm beginning to make quite a bit of impact in terms of people accepting and buying into shading devices, and it may cost a little bit more. This one is air conditioned, by the way, you can see it. But still, the cost of air conditioning is so much less because of the shading devices and opening to the north directions. Next. Next. This is very small. This one is a small reading room in Nandigram itself. Has the double roof ventilated through. There is only one wall fan which cools this space. There are nothing else. The windows are open, not even a ceiling fan, and it's quite comfortable. You can sit there for a few hours, and even in the summertime, and it won't bother you. You'll be fine. You'll be okay. Next. Now this project It's one of the largest projects I've done in India. Very rarely you get a chance to do something like that. I had known a client for a very long time. I've been working with him. So in 2011, I think he came, his son, not him, he had passed away, and asked me to design a medical college hostel building for 600 students. Not air conditioning at all. And it was quite a bit of challenge, but I kept talking to him, cajoling him about going for a double wall system, shading devices. That India is not very, they don't want to spend the money, let's just say that. They're beginning to buy into that whole concept. They realize that air conditioning buildings is not the way to go, especially in tropical climates with such an enormous heat. Next. Oh, I'm sorry. This is, I misspoke it. This is another project. Talk about sustainability. This is a geodesic dome dormitories we have in Nandigram. It's been there for 25 years. Very thin layer of concrete. It's been leaking like hell. It's been very uncomfortable in summer. Winters are cold. And we were thinking about demolishing this building. And I realized that we just don't have the money to replace this building, so next best thing is what we salvaged the building. Next. So we decided to basically put a roof on it, make it very architectural, pleasing. So now the roof is on. It's wonderful, no leaks, heat is much less. When the winter time, it's not that cold either. And cost was like 1/20th of what we would have spent if we had built a new building. Next. This is the one I just mentioned about the hostel. It's ongoing. It will be completed in another 6 months or so. And see the round two circles. Basically, they are reading lounges on each corner. In India, this is a traditional dormitory divided into two. The left is for the girls, the right is for the boys. That's the way things work in India culturally. So, that's why you see the two lounges on each end and the circle. Entire building will be wrapped into either louvers, or this is a ceramic, I don't want to say tile, but ceramic block or clay blocks. Beautifully built by somebody in Ahmedabad, figured out nicely, because you have to be very careful because it should not fall on somebody's head. We have spent quite a bit of time to make this thing work. And no air conditioning. So the whole thing is natural ventilation. We shade the air such that when it goes through the building, it is much cooler. Next. So, architecturally, I can share this building later on if I ever visit your college, at MSU. Architecturally also, it's very pleasing. The whole project is lifted up the ground by portal systems and so on and so forth. And the client is extremely pleased with the concept. Next. It's much more complete than what this slide shows, but you can see the beginning of the finishing of it. Even these round circles are structurally very creative. It's basically half cantilever from the columns on each side. And I was even skeptical when I saw the structural guy coming up with. I thought it was a compression ring, but it's not. Next. Next. Now imagine 700 students living in that one building. It's a 13-story building. So that's a building that I finished. And there is right across from that building is a hospital building. The building on the right is a sports center, which is to be constructed soon. That is also was designed by me. And the hospital building wasn't designed by me. I mean, I was involved in a little bit. So when this building is being finished, the client called me and asked me if I would entertain designing the plaza for him. Because this plaza is probably where the future college building is going to go. So eventually this plaza may go away, but it might take 10 years before if it ever happens. So I came up with anyway, this is the concept. All the planting we do here is native because this is not too far from the bay. So there is an enormous salinity in the water. And the landscape architect who worked with us, she is very good at figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And anyway, so this is the design to be, as soon as the building is finished, another month or so, when I go back, this project will start. And then there is a whole philosophy behind in it about yin and yang, anyway, without going into all the details. Next. So you can see the building on the left is a hospital, the building on the right is a hostel building, and this is the plaza. Next. This is another small library building. It's only hardly 3,000 square feet. It's under construction. Next. It's amazing to use local materials, local quick local technology. I think that's the right word. And we insist using only local labor also. Next. It's very common in India to use clay pots as a part of the concrete ceiling. Next. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about digital painting. The reason I'm talking about it is I used to teach graphics and graphics. And I always used to say the medium may change, but the philosophy or what is the word I'm looking for doesn't change. So I decided to take myself as a challenge to do digital painting, digital drawings. And what I have found out that it is now most of even my architectural sketches, I do it on iPad Pro with a pen. Even a few drafting sketches I do it on. I'm almost now getting away from using paper, which would be a major shift in the way I used to do it, the way I used to think. And although I still think paper and pencil is probably as easily available than the digital print. But now with technology, I think anybody can afford to do digital drawings. And I'll show you my interest in paintings next. Because I'm not busy 24 hours a day, and I'm doing architecture. So about 2-3 years ago, actually, I wasn't doing anything much. So I decided to start doing paintings. And to my surprise, a lot of my sketches and paintings, one of my very close friends, who is a very wonderful interior architect from Mumbai, uses a lot in his interior work. He mends it and bends it and prints it on a silk and prints it on a canvas. Whatever works for him, he uses it. Next. So these are all the next. These are all the. I could give a 2-hour lecture about digital sketching, if that's the right way to do it. Put it. But a lot of my drawings now lately have been done on that. Next. It's easy to store them anyway. Next. And I get fascinated by the so-called harsh landscape of place where I live. There are hills, there are dry hills, and I travel quite a bit in the villages because that's what we do. One of our missions of Nandigram is outreach to provide the village growth, medical. I didn't talk in great detail about what we do in Nandigram, but the main focus is outreach to the people in need, in help. And whenever I go there, it just amazes me. And I always look at this house on the top of the hill. And every time I see that, I feel like I want to live there. Next. There is one more video, I believe, that shows the digital process of my painting. And the nice thing about digital drawings is you can literally catalog the whole process without the end product is important, but it shows you where you started and where you ended up. Do we have that?
We do. Yeah, I can start it now.
So I think the reason I wanted to share this with you is that process of anything you design, architecture, landscape architecture, planning, graphics, paintings, there's a layer of information that goes into it and how each layer adds to the other and how it becomes a whole, part to the whole and whole to the parts. And I think it's the technology is here. Students are much more savvier than I or you can be, or anybody who is at my age can be. And I think they need to take advantage of this medium. And essentially, that's about the size of my presentation. Open for any questions.
Thank you, Mahendra. That was very inspiring. So yeah, we can open it up to questions now, or comments, discussion.
I know I had to sort of cut it short very quickly because time was running out. So, but anyway,
No, we got
I can
time.
always go back to Morgan while I'm in Baltimore.
I have a question. What, and you might have mentioned this, what software did you use to do that drawing?
It's an iPad Pro, and the app is Procreate.
Well, it's beautiful. I love the way you kind of subtracted, added. It was like you were drawing a landscape that was growing over time. It was really beautiful.
In fact, the reason I draw a lot more landscape now is that I think I'm now beginning to believe that landscape should influence the architecture and not the other way around. You know, it should be, it really should be designed landscape first, sort of. Rather than figure ground, it should be ground figure. Let the ground takes the precedence and let the figure evolve. And this is a new process I've been following up as closely as I can in my heart. I'm trying to understand the deep landscapes. I don't really. I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to understand the biophilic nature of landscape. And we are experimenting with what we call as an agroforest, meaning how do you do the agriculture as a part of the forest, or forest includes agriculture, not one or the other. And we just took a small demonstration plot, and we are trying to do that, you know, and I can even go in much more detail about what this whole agroforest concept is. So I you know, even my own house in Nandigram really was inspired by a beautiful tree. We call it a rain tree. A gorgeous grand tree with the branches that you can't imagine. So those branches are the one.
Mahendra, we have some questions in the chat actually. So Suzanne Frazier apologizes, her mic and camera are not working. She asks, what's next at Nandigram? Can Morgan students do a study abroad at Nandigram?
I would love to, well, you know, as I said, I have been part of Morgan, even though I have left it 10 years ago, just not left in emotional connection anyway. And I personally feel that if Morgan students can come, especially during the winter break, because that's when the climate is very friendly, we have accommodation. We have a space where we can accommodate up to 30 guests. We have cottages. And our Ecad center will be the place to study together, research together, work together, you know, I haven't quite figured out exactly what it is we do when we get together, but local craftsmen, working with them, whatever sort of gives them a different exposure about what happens in India versus what happens in the West, and you know, why two are different, but at the same time they are not that different anyway. And because I have lived here for all my life, my brand is still very Western. I mean, people do blame me for that.
Glenn LaRue Smith from Push Studio says, how is the funding for projects in India different in any way from in the States, especially the student housing?
It's just the labor is much cheaper. Materials are not that cheap. Remember, after all, these are industrial materials. Metal costs almost the same. Steel costs are almost the same. There's a little bit less. Cement doesn't cost that cheap either. But labor is almost 1/6 of what it would cost here, 1/7 of what it would cost here. And the other thing is, I think the major part of building industry in this country is HVAC system and electric, you know, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and electrical, which is almost 40% of the cost. In India, in a normal all-use buildings, we have none of that. So 40% cost goes right away. This, as I said, we just have to get used to so-called discomfort, if that's the right word. I have seen it that colder the climate, more the usage of energy. Of course, you have heat. I mean, I was just looking at the usage of electricity in Finland and Iceland, way higher than the United States, way higher. But then you look at the electricity use of Sudan, which is like only 21 kilowatt per person per year. It's hardly any. So I think the colder climate has to come up with some serious options. And I think geothermal is probably, to me, geothermal and solar are the way to go. Solar also takes a lot more energies to produce electricity, the panels, batteries, and they are not fossil free. You need quite a bit of that. Geothermal is the only heat that doesn't consume any fossil fuel at all. But then, of course, you have the technology. The house in Chicago is still, I think geothermal after 30 years, it begins to become an issue. You have to replace the system. But so far, the house in Chicago is working very well. And I'm working with another architect here, in Portland, Robert Osat. Absolutely amazing work. He's an organic architect. All of his projects are geothermally heated. That also, when I get to visit Baltimore and SU, I'll share my interest in his work. I used to tell the students, if you want to go get better at what you do, learn somebody else's work. Why? That is extremely, even at this age, I saw his work and I fell in love with it. I really want to know how he thinks, why he thinks the way he thinks, and I want to sort of dispel the mystery of his work. So I offered him to do a book for him. And he himself said, Mahendra, he's the same age as I am. And he said, I'm a bad writer. I don't want to, but if you will help me, I'll do it. So with me and a couple of helpers from India, we are putting a book together, not because I need a book at this age of my name. I just want to figure out exactly how, why, and can I analyze it to a point where anybody can understand, students especially, young professional. What is so mysterious about his work? Or is it mysterious? Which I don't think it is. So that also book I'll share when I get there. Anybody?
Any other questions? Comments?
So anyway, it was wonderful to share what I do, and I really am eagerly interested in making connections with the schools in this country. More than, of course, my priority, if it can work out. And we can make absolutely sure that when students do come to India, at least when they are in Nandigram, they are very safe. And it will provide an environment in which they can learn something without having any other worries. Of course, we are very vegetarian, so make sure that anybody who comes to our ashram has to be vegetarian or has to eat
vegetables for a week.
Vegetarian for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But there is a lot to learn from this craftsman. This is what I really. It's amazing how it is so natural for them to do things what they do. I mean, they make it look so simple. When I look at it, I say, "Oh my God!"
I think that's something. I know our students love to are dying to learn more about materiality and even in landscape architecture and how to actually craft things, whether they're walls or the screens that student was making. And I think that would be just a really valuable, focus on materiality and actually kind of construction of architectural elements.
Yeah, and that was going to be one of my questions, Mahendra, is whether when we go for either wintermester, as you suggested, can we have design build projects? And I agree, Sarah, the materiality, our students will benefit extremely from that experience, I think.
Yeah, I know Christopher Alexander used to run a studio at UCLA, summer studio. And that's precisely, I would like to follow that model a little bit. Because that's what he did. He would have I think he invited only 20 students. Of course, he had a big following, so a lot of students wanted to go. They would actually sit down and talk about design, a particular, whatever it is. It could be just a simple lookout. And even as small thing as it may be, there's a lot of discourse. Why, what, who does it? And we have local laborers who can help us. We need to make sure that it's safe. I would say yes. Very much so. And just simple, just being there, just being there, changes your whole perception about the life in somewhere else in the world. Yeah. So I yes, very much so.
Okay.
And I think we opened it. We had to close it because of the second wave. That's why I'm here anyway. I think when we go back, hopefully we can begin at a different scale. I know I have a lot of interest from students in India also, from Mumbai and Delhi and all of that. So only time will tell. This is just a start.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Well, thank you guys, everybody. Stay put.
Thank you.
I'll see you shortly.
Yep.